Hey y'all, how y'all doing today? It is Sunday. I'm not wearing my watch. I don't know what the day is. I know this coming Wednesday's the 20th. That's Inauguration Day. But anyway, so today is going to be another one of those stories where I want to tell you a main story, but to tell you that story, I gotta go back and tell you another story first. So I'm kind of like a reverse Paul Harvey. Y'all remember Paul Harvey? He would come on and he would tell you, the beginning of a story, then go to a commercial, and he'd come back and tell you the rest of the story. Anyway, so let's go back in time. Okay, first of all, some of y'all in your comments, not necessarily on YouTube, but maybe on Instagram, wanted to hear more about the my experiences in the pagan prison ministry. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm going to tell you about my first experience with the pagan prison ministry. And again, I got involved in the pagan prison ministry through my friend Jezebel, who was, I'm not going to say her position, but she was high up in the organization that was once known as WARD, which was Witches Against Religious Discrimination. And my title at the time, well, no, not at the time, because I had just started. I hadn't started being the communications director. I was just I tagged along with her on trips and stuff. So, the way she got me in this was, again, I was working in the mill, and I was working second shift, and I would get up in the morning, make breakfast, turn on the TV. This was before computers and the internet, or at least before I had a computer or the internet. In fact, my first computer that I had in my own home was Web TV. Do y'all remember that? Where you had like a little keyboard, a remote control keyboard, and a little box that went on top of your TV, that like a cable box, and that was how you accessed the internet. So anyway, this is before even I had a Web TV. And I was a good little Wiccan. I had my Book of Shadows, and every day, I would pull out my Book of Shadows because I was trying to build it up, and I would write in my Book of Shadows. Again, no computer, no typewriter, everything was handwritten. And my Book of Shadows was like really big and nice, and it was all handwritten. I'm going to show you my present Book of Shadows now. Before I show it to you, one thing I used to do is, I no longer identify as Wiccan, but I'm keeping my Book of Shadows because I never know. There might be information in here I need. I'm not going to just throw it away. I may pass it down to someone one day. But about once a year, it seemed like I would go through my Book of Shadows and edit it and update it. And like I said, I would usually do it by hand. And later on, when I got a computer, I started typing things up. And so this is my present Wiccan Book of Shadows. This is a 3-ring binder that I covered in sort of this faux leather, and I glued this pentagram on it. And I'm such an anal Virgo. You can see I have it tabbed, and I have artwork and everything, and it's very big and heavy. And so one day, when I had met Jezebel, and she told me she worked in the pagan prison ministry, and she was looking for a donation. She was looking for cloth to make what she called amulet bags. And I was working in the mill at that time, and in the mill, in the room where they inspect the cloth, they would cut up the cloth that didn't pass inspection and throw it in this box. And then people could get it and do with it what they want. A lot of times in the mill, we would grab that cloth and use it to wipe off our clothes, because that loose cotton and starch would cling to your clothes, and you would just use it to wipe yourself off, because they did have the compressed air guns, and if you got caught doing that, you could get fired. So anyway, I had access to that cloth that they were just going to throw away anyway. So I told her, "Oh, I have cloth. I can get you some." So I gave her, I gathered up some cloth and I gave it to her. She cut it out and dyed it and took it to the prisoners. And so this particular day, I was at home. I was working on writing in my Book of Shadows, and she came and knocked on my door, and she had some letters for me that she was hand delivering. They were thank you letters from the her coven at the prison where I donated this cloth, and they were all, like maybe 10 or 12 letters from these guys. And she noticed my Book of Shadows, and she really loved it and liked it and was impressed with it. And she asked me, would I be willing to come to the facility and teach a class on your Book of Shadows? And I agreed to do it. So, I can't remember. I may or may not have had to submit my information to the prison for a background check. I don't know if I had to at that time. This particular facility was in North Carolina, and it was the Foothills Correctional Institute or something like. I know it's Foothills Correctional, and it was in North Carolina. So we drove up there. I can't remember what day it was. I believe it was during the daytime because I was working second shift, and which meant I went in at 4 and I got off at midnight. And I did not take my Book of Shadows with me because I did not feel comfortable, going into a prison. You don't know how something's gonna be handled or treated or kept from you. You just don't know. I just was not comfortable, but I did take some photos, and I had like a little lecture I prepared, being the anal Virgo that I am, and little diagrams I drew to sort of give them an idea of things. And so I went there. There was the class was held in like a cafeteria. It was completely empty except for me, Jezebel, the chaplain at the facility, I believe 2 guards. I'm sorry, correctional officers. You don't call them guards. 2 correctional officers and about 20 inmates. And all these inmates were men. They were probably between the ages of 20 and 26, 27. And they were from different paths. There were some who were Celtic. There was one guy who was of the Italian tradition, Stragaria. What else? They were all very eager and happy. I walked in, I was very comfortable. I didn't feel scared. Just from my own intuition and knowledge, I didn't ask them anything about their crimes, what you were in for, anything like that. I gave my sort of lecture on the Book of Shadows, and then there was sort of a question and answer period after that. They asked me, about my life and what I did, and I knew not to give any details that were too personal. I can't even think of anything, but just anything too personal. I did mention that I was gay. I think someone asked me if I had a girlfriend, and I'm obviously gay. It's just, you could see my gayness from space. And so I didn't mind that question because it just sort of put it out there and there was no doubt. I did mention I was gay. And then towards the end, I think there was some coven business that needed to be attended to, and of which I was not a part of. And so, but I couldn't leave. Like, Jezebel was a smoker at one point. I believe the chaplain was a smoker too. So at one point in this big cafeteria, it's not like she could be escorted outside, have her cigarette, and come back. At one point, we're over here gathered at the table before my lecture. Her and the chaplain went way over in a corner and smoked their cigarettes. One correctional officer was with me and my group. One correctional officer was down there with her, just chatting and talking. So it's not like I could just leave. And so in her tradition, which I think it was called Southern She, which is Sidhe, which I believe is a Celtic word for fairy or spirit. Can't quite remember. I'm sure someone will correct me or look it up. This has been like 20 years ago. So that coven, she had to call up or convene what she called, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Brehall Court. So I basically went and in that corner, sat down with a chair. I kind of flipped through my Book of Shadows. I wasn't trying to be too nosy. They convened their little Brehall Court and settled whatever issue it was that needed to be issued with whatever problem had arose. And then I think it was about 2 hours from beginning to end. So around about the end, maybe the last 10 minutes, we just sort of broke up into little groups, and some of them came over and talked to me, and some of them kind of talked to the here. There was like little pockets of group, and Jezebel was talking to the chaplain. And then I forgot there was an assistant chaplain. Yes. So there was an assistant chaplain, and he was a ratty little guy. I got a very negative vibe from him. He was like the head chaplain. He wanted to stare. This assistant chaplain, it was very obvious we were not, as far as he's concerned, we were not welcome there. He didn't approve of us being there. He didn't approve of the group. And so I was standing here and I had maybe 3 guys, and they were, I was new. I was someone new. So they're like all asking me questions and talking to me and asking me about spells. And at that time, I identified as, I called it a hearth witch, but basically a kitchen witch. I spun my magic around my home. My home is my temple, and I really relished, the practical aspects of the craft. And they were asking me about, how do I do, spells in, as a kitchen witch. And I told them how, like, I like to just sort of combine take a mundane activity and make it magical. For instance, if I'm washing dishes, I might think of the dishes like parts of my body. And as I wash that dish, I'm washing that part of my body in a spiritual sense. So maybe if I'm washing a plate, that's my head. If I'm washing a spoon, that's my arm. If I'm washing a knife, that's my hoo-ha. If I'm washing a pot, that might be my belly. And so by the time I'm done washing the dishes, I've cleansed myself. And then maybe the sink itself represents my home. So if I'm washing the 4, walls of my sink, and the bottom, I'm washing my home. That was one example. They asked me specifically for a love spell or a spell to meet someone, and I told them, I've done something like that before. And what I did was, each night when I cooked, I had my salt and pepper on my stove, and the stove I had at that time had like a little ledge at the top, and then your knobs were right here. So I took my salt and pepper and put it on the ledge as far apart as they would go, and I named the salt after someone I wanted to meet, unknown lover, whatever, and I named the pepper after myself. And every day when I'm cooking, I would turn on the stove, and so I'm heating things up. And then I would be cooking my food, and I would take the salt and pepper and I'd bring it just a little bit closer together, and I would stir my food clockwise, and I would focus on love coming to me or what have you. And then, like I said, every day when I'm cooking, I would move that salt and pepper a little bit closer together until they touched. And it took about 2 weeks, and I believe I worked from the new moon to the full moon, the waxing moon. And I told them, they asked me, did it work? And I said, you know what? It actually did. And I met someone, he worked at a grocery store, and when I met him, he was actually stocking the salt. And I used salt and pepper to do it, and I thought that was just, that just blew me away. Anyway, so I thought it was a positive experience. I liked the guys liked me. They asked me if I would come back. They asked me if they could write to me. I said, sure. So I gave them permission to have my address, and I left. And then, I went back home, and a couple of days later, I was at work, and I called my house. I had a feeling. I called my house to check my messages, and there was a message from Jezebel saying, hey, I need you to give me a call when you get this message. I was like, uh-oh, what is it? It wasn't a good feeling. So I called her. I was at work. I called her, and she said, hey, listen, I just want you to know you didn't do anything wrong. But you're banned from the Foothills Correctional. You can't go back there to teach or anything. And I was like, well, really? Why? So when I was telling the story about the salt and pepper, that ratty assistant chaplain was sort of on the peripheral of my group, and he did not like my story. He banned me on the, what is the word I'm looking for? He banned me on the premise that I was teaching homosexuality to the inmates, and I was presenting it as a positive thing, and he didn't agree with that. And so on that alone, I was banned from Foothills. And even though the guys wrote me and I wrote them back, I never went back there. I believed, I was told after a year I would be able to reapply to go back there, but after that experience with that ratty assistant chaplain, I didn't feel comfortable and I didn't want to do it anymore. And then later on, we were contacted by the head chaplain of South Carolina. Now, the way I understood it was, what was told to me was there was an inmate in South Carolina who claimed to have known Gerald Gardner and hung out with him. He identified as Wiccan. He felt as though he was not being allowed to practice his religion. He was going to sue the state of South Carolina. It was going to be a lawsuit. And so someone in South Carolina reached out to the chaplains in North Carolina for looking for an advisor, someone to maybe mediate. And the people in North Carolina told the people in South Carolina about Jezebel. And so I did not want to go back to the North Carolina facility, but when the opportunity to meet with the chaplains in South Carolina arose, I said, she talked me into it. And we made a deal that, at least for, the first little bit, she would not, if I was to go to a facility, she would always be with me. Now, down the road, I went to some places by myself. But in the beginning, we made it clear from up front, we were a team. So we met the chaplain, and what we agreed to do was we agreed to write a Wiccan study handbook, which would eventually become the official Wiccan study handbook. I should have grabbed it and showed it to you, but then it shows Jezebel's real name, so I'm not going to do that. We agreed to write this book, and we agreed to go around to different facilities in South Carolina and teach this course. And for the chaplains who were willing, we would teach them how to teach the course, or at least to lead the rituals or the meetings or what have you, the ones that were comfortable with it. So we wrote this book. The state of South Carolina published it, and then we went around, to different facilities all over South Carolina teaching this course. I know one of my favorites was Watery. It was about 30 to 45 minutes from my home, and the only thing I did not like about I liked the guys, I liked the correctional officers, because there were some correctional officers who were Wiccan or pagan themselves, and they would sit in, but they wouldn't, they would tell us privately, but publicly they were just there to do their job. At the Watery facility, the only thing I didn't like was the chaplain. This was a female chaplain. She was one of those who did not want us there. And she would I would be standing there teaching, answering questions, and I would see out the corner of my eye her standing just outside the door listening. And so I had to be very careful of what I said, because if I said anything out of the way, it would, turn into an issue. I remember, and even sometimes, even in just conversations with her, she would blow it out of proportion. I remember one time when I got to a point where I was fine traveling to Watery on my own. I drove down to the prison. I went to the guard shack. I drove up to the chapel. I was getting out of my car, and even the chapel was surrounded by a different fence, and locked in. So she would have to come out and let me in. And then when I had left Great Falls, it was raining. And as I drove south down toward Watery, the weather got a little bit bigger, but in the distance you could see the rain coming. And I made an offhand, she said, "Oh, that looks like the weather's gonna turn." And I made an offhand comment like, "Oh yeah, I guess the rain followed me." And she turned that into, he says he controls the weather and he's going to make a thunderstorm. And I'm like, really? I mean, like, so I had to like be really careful what I said around this chaplain. Other places, the one down near Buford, and I honestly can't remember the name. I mentioned this in one of my previous videos. The chaplain identified as a Christos, and a Christos is a Christian who practices magic. And he was like gung-ho, all for it. He would do anything, you know, that within reason. You know, for example, if we did ritual, you could not have an open flame unless there was a chaplain there. And the chaplain had to be the one to light the candle. The inmates could not have access to the fire. We could not have access to the fire as for, you know, lighting candles. The chaplain had to light the candles. So he was like, if we needed it, he would, you know, if he was off that day, but we were scheduled to come in for a ritual, he would, you know, come in on his day off and do that. So he was very gung-ho. There was another facility we went to in South Carolina where it was clear we were not wanted. This chaplain, and as I even sit here, I must have blocked it out of my mind because I can't remember whether it was a man or a woman or what they looked like. But what I do remember is this chaplain taking us on a tour of the prison. Now, every other prison we went to, there was either a correctional officer or a trustee along with us. This chaplain, it was just me, Jezebel, and this chaplain, and they took us around the facility. And at one point, the chaplain took us into a pod. Now, me, a gay man, Jezebel, a straight woman, and then the chaplain took us into this pod. Now, a pod is like a group of cells, and there was like maybe 10 cells on the ground floor and 10 cells on the upper floor. And then there were where the stairs were, there's a shower facility under these stairs, and at the top of the stairs was another shower facility. And so we walk in, the chaplain goes, oh, excuse me a moment, walks out. So it's me and Jezebel alone in this pod. The chaplain walked out for something. We were locked in. We look up. Naked prisoners came out of the showers, looked down at us. People started gathering around at us like, who are you people? What are you doing here or whatever? And then, I mean, part of me was a little apprehensive. I'm a person who I've learned to hide my emotions, so I didn't show any fear. I was like, this has got to be a joke, you know. Well, what are they thinking? But anyway, chaplain came back in and took us out. You know, we went on a tour of the facility. I believe we only went to that facility twice, and I think it was mainly because it was so far away. So we didn't really go there that often. Anyway, so that is a little bit of my experience with the pagan prison ministry. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, have a good day. I don't know what's happening.